Namaskar. Welcome to Women's Special Express Show. Today we have a guest who does not read lines but reads literally between the lines. As a child, she was dyslexic, so reading anywhere but lines was always her favorite part. She was gifted with some intuitions, but she decided to take that intuition with logical means to weigh and find out if this intuition can be tapped to unfold human beings and help them for their betterment. She is the one who had read thousands of minds with this technique and have helped them to succeed in their fields. She literally took handwriting analysis to a level where now she is known as a graphologist and high performance coach. Let's hear more from her on why absolutely right is so right. Let's welcome Aditi Surana, a graphologist, on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. This is so exciting. And the fact that we are seeing each other after ages, I think after like 20 years or something. That's so sweet. So
I
nice.
know, I know. I'm so excited to see you. She's a very dear friend of mine, and I mean, we are catching up just with this occasion of this show. I'm so glad to see you again.
Likewise.
So, Aditi, how is it going for you in the lockdown? I know you love traveling and now you're just caged in a home.
So I must say, I am an introvert. So I love traveling, but travel for me also is like spending a lot of time by myself. I love staying alone. So before the lockdown, I lived by myself in my house in Bombay. Actually, in this lockdown, my mother has moved in with me. So that was a big shift for me because after I'm staying with her for the first time as an adult. So that really took some adjusting. But now I think after so many months, we are comfortable with that too. So traveling wasn't a concern because work kept me really, really busy. So I think if wouldn't have been for the work, then I would have really got bored and binge watched some Netflix. But I have watched literally one series. I haven't got any time to do that. So I consider myself very, very lucky that I've been like genuinely busy. But yeah, so lockdown has not been different. A lot of my work is online any which ways. So for the lockdown. So for me, it was literally like an extension of it. So it is no different for me. Like literally, it is like literally living that life, probably on a hyper mode now, but no difference.
I
I
know.
miss traveling. I miss traveling. I miss hanging with friends. I miss like all of us. So that
Hmm.
is a part. But when you're occupied doing something that you really care for, then it doesn't matter. So I think I'm okay. I'm honestly speaking, I'm happier.
Okay, so just now you spoke about that you're being too busy in this lockdown period, and you're doing so many things. We hear you on the podcast and we see your videos, we see you're sharing tips so nicely. You have so many programs just for the lockdown. Some of them are free, some of them are charged. We'd like to know more about it.
So when the lockdown began in India, I think Italy and other European countries went in the lockdown much before us. So I was studying and I was analyzing what was the mental health challenges that these people were facing being in the lockdown because obviously nobody was ready for such kind of life. So in my research, I realized people are going through anxiety. They are kind of getting really, really close to depression. And people who are already suffering from such things, they are getting aggravated, obviously, because all their environment was changing. Insomnia became another concern. So I think it was just the first week of the lockdown where we announced a social initiative, actually two. One of them was a journaling workshop because I feel a lot of times our emotions are so bottled up and we do not know how to express them. Even if we try to express them to our closest people, we don't feel conveyed because we don't know whether people are getting it or not. And I have come across graphology, as you were talking about, is a study of handwriting. So I've done a lot of my research on how handwriting or the technique of handwriting is a mind body coordinated skill. So when you actually use handwriting to write your emotions out, you feel calmer. There is a therapy, or the skill itself is therapeutic. So what you might not feel by talking about it, you actually experience it when you really put your pen on paper. Now we thought, let's take journaling to the next level, and we combined it with one handwriting stroke that allows your mind to be really, really calm. And anybody who is feeling anxiety, when our viewers who are watching this show, or for you and me, like in the busy day, and I know you have a like really young child, so while doing that, how we get hyper and we get wired up. I listen to people almost every day, and their issues, their challenges, sometimes they get to you. So you need a mental workout. We are very disciplined about physical workout, and we created this journaling workshop around it. It was
Wow.
free. It was free
Hmm.
till now. It was a 21-day process. So we created, it was Instagram live kind of a workshop. So people came in every day. We spoke with them. So the videos got recorded. People asked questions. And it was a beautiful journey. I can't tell you, Pranali, this is one of the most amazing things I have ever done in my life, because 700 people from all around the world participated. And
Wow.
each day we have 4, 5, a registration for this initiative. So you know that the word of mouth is going around. People are suggesting to friends and family members, because we are not promoting it. We spoke about it then and then we stopped. So whomever came in like the process, they are talking about it now and they're recommending friends, which is a beautiful journey. You hear testimonials from people who are dealing with insomnia found their calmness, people who are living alone in remote places, even
Hmm.
villages in India, they participated, and people from all around, different cities from the world participated. So it became like first time you do something
Hmm.
wholeheartedly and you feel the world is responding. That was humbling and that was beautiful. The other initiative was we decided to offer 4 free sessions every day for people to connect with. Like sometimes when you are really lost, you don't know what is bothering you, and graphology has that benefit, or that advantage to know what is happening within you. So it mirrors your mind. So we decided, why not to take that mirroring to the next level. So I do that professionally anyways, but here we said, let's open doors and let's figure it out. So every day of lockdown in Bombay or India, we said we will be doing this. So we analyzed 324 people in this initiative. And when you open the inner worlds, it's a floodgate. When you have people, open up. And so for me, every day waking up and making sure that I show up to listen to people and to talk to them and to do that workshop was an interesting journey. I think you really have to take score. You have your own anxieties. You don't know how the lockdown is going to go. I was
Right.
concerned about my mother, like adjusting to she being here and all of that, the personal front happening. But at the same time, it's really, I think the fun of servicing at the field that you've committed to is beyond everything. So I feel really lucky that I have my profession. I feel really lucky that people trusted our process, and even my team. Everybody worked so hard in this phase. So it has been beautiful. All I would say.
Yeah, and we do see that you have a podcast now, and you're giving absolutely right tips. I have listened to myself for some of them, and I tried implementing in the last week one of the technique. And yes, it does give a good relief, and it just give us that time which generally we don't take out. Like some people like working out is their kind of a time to take out. For some people it's writing, some people it's different. But no matter what, just spending down your thoughts and just releasing yourself sometimes really help. And so that note, the graphologist, when we see, we generally never saw that as a profession
Yeah, it
by
was a
any.
hobby. It was a hobby all along. I agree.
I know during the college days you used to love doing that, used to sit in the coffee shop. But after that, what happened, and how this the whole profession revolved around you, we didn't know. So I am here to listen to your story, and I'm sure the most of the viewers also want to know what this graphology means, and how this journey started, and how your hobby uh, became your profession.
So the subject of graphology is looking at the graphs that your handwriting creates unknowingly. So there's a part of our writing where you're conscious, you're writing, if you're writing on a greeting card or you're writing to present something, you're always like all calligraphy and all of that technique you try and use. But when it comes to actually writing, like when you write in a free flow, your mind is giving away so many pointers, information out there. And it is not only handwriting where your mind is giving away information. The way you sit, the way you walk, the way you dress up, whether you eat your favorite dish as the first thing in your meal or as the last thing in your meal. When you leave the house, when you lock the door, do you check it 2, 3 times? Now, all of these are your personality traits given out in your behavior or through your body language. Handwriting is just one of them. And probably for us being graphologists, we study that. It's like for a doctor who can read your blood report more than what you can do. Similarly, graphologists can look at the graph happening on your emotional levels, on your behavioral patterns, your decision making, your leadership style, your stressors, your mind blocks, your relationship conflicts, where do they come from, where your insecurities are. So there are 800 parameters in handwriting, and they talk about your personality. So it's a mathematical study. It is not an artistic profession. It's a complete mathematical study. You study like 2 millimeter thickness and what is the pressure that the handwriting creates. So sometimes people look at it and they find it very romantic. They're like, oh my god, I'm gonna analyze writing. Yeah, yeah. When they come to the actual class, and when I teach graphology, so when they're like, oh, but this sounds so technical. You have to look at so many factors. I'm like, if you want to talk about a complex machine like human being, then you will have to have all these measurements going. So
Right.
that is graphology. I became a professional because of the need, because my father didn't agree with my career choice.
Hmm.
So I started analyzing writing intuitively at the age of 14. So I have been, I used to look at them, and something used to happen in my head, and I used to talk about their cupboards, my friends' closets, and how they behaved with people. And all
Hmm.
of us used to be surprised. We're like, oh, how can you talk? And I had like no clue how could I talk. How an artist in the future as a child can draw something better. I think it was like just that. And also I'm a dyslexic. So that time I was obviously in India, we didn't speak about dyslexia. So I was undiagnosed dyslexic child. So I struggled with languages, I struggled with writing, and most of the time I knew what I wanted to write, but by the time I could write, it turned out something else. I didn't score great. So as a teenager, I didn't have a great personality that I could count on. Now suddenly I found my superpower. So I knew that, I think I was striving to know that I have something that I can look at. That was a big deal. That was the beginning point. But by the time I was 19, I told my father that I really like this and I would like to take this as my career. And he
Hmm.
freaked out. My father is a South Indian, and if you know anything about Indian, South Indians are very, very disciplined in general. So,
Hmm.
being a South Indian father that he is, he freaked out. He said, "No, no, you can't be doing this. This can't be a career." And obviously, he had like great hopes, and he thought one day I would do something different, blah blah blah, which I did, but not in his way. So he said, in order to convince me to behave otherwise, he said, if you have to do this, leave the house right now. He thought I would get scared and I would not do that. And I still remember it was 10 o'clock in the night, and I packed my bags and I left.
Oh.
And that was like a turning point. I had to become a professional because I had to support my education. I had to do everything after that because I made that decision. I jumped. But the day I was leaving my house and moving out, like I had my bags in my hands, I still
Hmm.
remember something just felt right. Like inside my heart, I just knew I had to do this. And it wasn't against my dad as much as I knew that if I don't explore it myself, I can never convince anybody that this can be a profession. And then I jumped in. I said, okay, now I have to figure it out because you have to take care of yourself and you have to pay your college fees and you have to do everything else. You don't expect yourself to do that. So I was never planned.
Hmm.
So, but having said that, when you're determined, I think somebody said that to a committed person, there is no failure. So you have failures on the way, but you are committed to figure it out. So when there is no
Hmm.
turning back, you always figure a way to move forward. So uh, some ideas came, and I became a professional also in a very interesting way. The coffee shop incidents. I was having a coffee with a friend who was trying to figure out what we were going to do because was already out of my house and we were like talking about it. And he looked at the coffee shop logo and he said, why don't you go and talk to them? And I'm like, do you think they will entertain me? What are you talking about? He said,
Hmm.
why don't you give it a shot? I said, yeah,
Hmm.
okay. So we had two coffee chains in Bombay. I went to the first one. They
Hmm.
almost humiliated me. They're like, oh, you can pay us 10,000 rupees a month and you can sit in our coffee shop and you can provide your service. And I had no clue what they were talking about. I was a college kid and I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I'm doing this because I have to pay my fees. So I don't understand what you're talking. Whereas I
Hmm.
went to the other second coffee shop. slightly discouraged, but the person was so convinced, and he I think saw some spark. So he said, "Why don't you go?" Like he invited me again, and I was next day. I was meeting all their Western zone heads, HR, marketing, everybody, operations, and they were
Hmm.
convinced on this idea. So I got a free license to uh, associate with them, and I started analyzing people in coffee shops all over Bombay. That was a big deal because then every day I got to practice my craft, and I got paid, and I got paid per person. So it was like a full bootstrapping, thrown into the deep end of the pool. You figure it out. Actually, very early on, I started a radio show like you, where I
Hmm.
started analyzing people online or on air, and that was just a turning point. So after that, there was no turning back, and so we took graphology to corporate world. We were the first one. I was the first full-time professional graphologist in India, and then I became the youngest one to host a show, and then I became the youngest one to take it to IBM and JSW and company Tata Motors. So that
Hmm.
kind of I feel when you're willing to try things out and you're willing to learn, it's not like okay, I know this and I'm going to figure it out. But I got trained. I did my international certification in these topics, and I became a psychometric professional. So I became a behavioral therapist. So I actually kept on creating all the knowledge banks that were needed for graphology to have a better standing. So that was the journey, and I think that continues.
It's an astounding journey, I would say. So when you were doing that, the coffee shop analysis, and when you were trying to, understand or people at that time, were you trained, or you had some of your intuitions and here and there study?
So by then, like when my first interaction, when I had that conflict or showdown with my dad, was my first basic local class of graphology, which I had studied. And
Hmm.
I bought some books, and I remember going to a bookshop to buy my college books, and I saw handwriting analysis book, and I had that moment of eureka. Everything I forgot, slow down motion, everything happened for me. Love at first sight. So I didn't buy my textbook. I studied from my friend's books, but I bought my graphology book, and that was like my Bible. That was like my Bhagavad Gita. I studied it end to end, and by then, by the time I left my home, graphology I had studied. I had never practiced professionally, but I had
Hmm.
studied. So
Hmm.
when I started practicing, I started learning on the go. So I think a lot of that happened.
Wow, that's interesting. So nowadays people don't write, Aditi. Most of them just type. There are bloggers who type. There are, all type of people write. After the school.
If I show you my typed material, would you be able to talk about me based on my fonts? I said,
Hmm.
but that is your computer's personality, not yours. Like for your personality, you have to physically write. But your question
Right.
is completely valid.
Yeah. So, after school, most of them kind of, left writing, is what I know. And it's because of this tech savvy world. We know that anything that you can digitize, that can stay longer than, what you can write. So even the schools nowadays, they're working on the iPads with the students and everything. So what do you suggest? People should keep writing? Should I mean, you're not a typologist, as you just said. It's a computer personality that you're analyzing. But are there any behavioral traits that you're picking up, like the type of font that they pick to express their emotions in certain ways, or something of that sort?
So I think most of the time when people are typing, they are bound by the technological availability. For example, most emotional exchanges happen on WhatsApp, and you don't necessarily choose your font on WhatsApp. You just whatever font is there, you just use it. Or your notes, any phone note app, you may choose once, but then you don't pay attention to it. That's like your way to make a note.
Hmm.
Having said that, that is not the idea. We do not even choose our fonts consciously while writing. When while writing, you just get into the flow. And you remember when we learned how to write, we were supposed to copy from the board. And your
Hmm.
teacher's writing ideally should have been your font, but that's not true. Right?
Yeah.
All of us deviated. And I remember days when in 10th standard, anybody could pick up anybody's notebook without any name or question answer sheet, and they say, "Oh, this is your writing," because by we studied together, we knew whose writing looked what, and some people have very peculiar handwritings.
Right.
Now that distinct differentiation is where your mind, so there are multiple processes when you write. The brain gives instructions, there are neural pathways involved, there are motor skills, there are nervous system, then actually writing the thought. So by the time it comes out on the paper, there are so many filters through which the process goes. And what comes out on the paper is a snapshot of how you think. So for our generation,
Hmm.
anybody who's about 25 maybe, we have all spent at least 10 years in writing, in
Hmm.
school, college, 10 to 15 years, all of us have spent.
Yeah.
Whereas people who are studying now, who are using technology and iPads right away, I honestly do not know how their writings would shape up, because right now graphology is relevant and I think it will be relevant till we grow old. I jokingly say this, for next 15 years, the work would be around these people. Beyond that, we will teach people the ancient science of handwriting. And people say, "Lo, now we have the Zen writing and all of that. That might be a mindfulness phase, but we haven't reached there. As of now, we have all adults, and that's the age group I work with. But it is interesting. I'm really keen to know, because also there's another aspect, right? When you write, the sensory memory building process is much stronger. When you
Right.
only use a screen, whatever you touch, it feels the same. When you hold a different pen, the texture is different, the ink smells different. So all of that is happening, and that is also in a way connecting with your experience in the moment. When you're
Hmm.
on the iPad or on your phone screen, everything has a similar or almost exact experience, other than the visual, than the music. But that physical, the tactile experience is same. So we really have to look at that as a topic of research, I believe, in the future.
That's interesting. So, I mean, I personally feel writing gives you good relief because I like writing. But there are people who don't like writing. They don't even like reading. So, what about them? How do you make them write journals? When they come to you for some kind of therapy or, find out what they can do best. How do you make them write journal? It must be a challenging part.
Actually, I don't talk about journaling as a hobby or as a habit. I talk about it as a problem solving thing. So when it's like tablets, you might not pick them and eat them on a dining table. You won't, but you would eat them because if they're solving a problem, you've got to do it. So you've got to do it. So when you look at journaling, so two ways or two reasons why it is not very tough for me to talk about it or convince people, because the
Hmm.
very moment they start doing it, they experience relief. Then I don't have to talk about it. They're already converted. I don't have to preach them further. So they just know because they experience the shift. And the second reason I feel, when I talk about it, I'm not talking from a space of write what you did in a day, or it is not a dear diary. The way
Hmm.
we talk about journaling is a solution oriented questioning process. So when you
Hmm.
ask a question which is directed in a specific area, for example, if I ask you, that incident that triggered you in a conversation last week,
Hmm.
if given a choice today, how would you respond to that same trigger differently?
Hmm.
Now that is not writing what happened. It's like, okay, that happened, but by the time you start answering or responding to this question that I just asked, you literally go and figure out, how can I change it? What could be an alternate way? Oh, I could have paused, or I should have probably reworded my thought, or I was
Hmm.
emotional, so I shouldn't have spoken in that moment. I could have spoken after 1 hour. Now, all
Hmm.
of that is a solution oriented journaling, and that
Right.
is very interesting, because you're not repeating or reliving the moment, which happens with lots of journaling. People just keep writing. So
Hmm.
one of my favorite things to say is personality is a sum total of all the patterns that we are, which means all the places that we have been till now. If you want to change that, you have to break the pattern. You got to decode the pattern. And you are the best person who can do that. I can guide, other people can guide, but you are the best person. The day you decide this pattern is not working for me, then you're not telling yourself, oh, but I'm like this only, how will I figure it out? That doesn't happen. You look at
Hmm.
yourself and you say, this pattern is not working for me, and I got to do something. And if you're determined, you would say, I would do anything in my capacity to change that pattern. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, most people you look at who are not really looking at themselves for what, with all honesty, they keep repeating the patterns for 20, 30, 50 years. and they know that that is not helping them, but they behave as if they're enslaved by their patterns,
Right.
right? So they just don't have any way out of their pattern, which is not true. All of us have that choice. If
Hmm.
all we require is your commitment to do that, and people who can do it also
Hmm.
keep exploring the space. So journaling for me is very, very powerful, because I genuinely believe you and I internally already have the answers, but our patterns and our filters and our social media, or in general social need to be recognized by other people or be validated by other people, all of that just like covers that, and we just don't look at the genuine answers that we have. Now if we can really work at it and
Hmm.
look at what we know, you already know a large deal. And that's what we do with journaling and graphotherapy, where the stroke that I was talking about, it allows you to really question your filters. I can
Hmm.
talk non-stop on this. I love my topic. I love my subject.
Absolutely loved. But here is this question, since you were dyslexic during the school time, you couldn't form the words properly, read properly, or write properly, and suddenly you could read in between the lines. I mean, all the dyslexic kids or the adults I know, they have been gifted by some or the other ways. They have some spark which general people don't have, because their right hemisphere is so active, and they can just decode, they can see three-dimensional pictures walking around, and people like us who are into two-dimensionals, they just can't figure it out. How can they visualize so fast? How can they come up with the solution so
You know,
fast?
I
So
have taken I have
we,
taken to sorry, I have taken to doodling recently, and I'm going to show you something I did for the dyslexic people.
oh,
So when dyslexic looks at the world, it looks like this, all over the place. When you're reading, like actually on the line, we are struggling. One word is popping out, and something all like mess is happening in our world. But if you look at that, I feel I'm still dyslexic, right? So I still struggle. So every time I have to record my podcast, and it started in March, this particular, so we've been working on it last year for 6 months before it actually released. So every time I had to record something where I had to read somebody's introduction, I had to read things which needed me to do like a larger scripted work. I struggle. I genuinely struggle to write something that is completely scripted, or even to read. Like, that's the biggest struggle. And it strikes in, and then it has all its. So when I'm talking to people, and if I'm uncomfortable, if I feel people are judging or like all of that, how all of us like shrink. If that happens, I start fumbling. I can't form sentences properly. But I have seen this, and it's my observation. The very moment I can find the closest thread to the impact that work or the situation or the podcast or the recording can have, and if I can get myself, doesn't happen every time, but if I can get myself to forget that I am the center stage here, and I give the importance to the work or the other person who can get benefited by the conversation we are having, then the flow resumes. Then I don't
nice.
have to struggle. But the very moment I'm conscious, which is all about like how would I be perceived? What would they think about me? When that is happening, then the triggers are stronger. So that is one of my hacks. So if you haven't explored, and most people keep denying, they say, "Oh, let me use autocorrect and let me use this." It helped me. I was diagnosed at 26 that I'm a dyslexic. So till that point, I used to feel ashamed for making small mistakes. I used to always, till date, I check everything I write and publish before I publish it by someone else. But that time I used to feel awkward to even ask. Now, because I'm very proud about it, and now I own it, I know that if I make mistakes, and I talk about it openly, because I really want people to understand that it is okay to be imperfect. It's okay to be broken at so many levels, as long as you're willing to move forward. People are really kind, and I'm not saying this because I'm supposed to. I'm genuinely saying, in so many public forums when I speak, I tell people in the first part of my introduction that I am a dyslexic, and sometimes I fumble. So in case I cannot, I think I communicate, but if you don't get it, please stop me and I will repeat the point. And suddenly you should see the room. People are so caring, and they're on board with me. They want to make sure that if I humble, if I make a mistake, they want to support it. So it was so beautiful. And I think that's the best part of the story, that people really, really want to be there.
Yeah, I think nobody talks about it. Even people who are dyslexic, they don't talk about it. People, like, for example, school teachers, they do understand some of the other patterns that are going wrong with their school kids, but they are unable to find out what can be done. They go reading after reading programs, the kid keep repeating some reading programs, go to some library hours, but they're not improving. And sometimes teachers are not aware what can be done for them. And just now what you shown, that doodling graph, which kind of helps, I think it's a beneficial tool, and most of the parents should be aware, teachers should be aware. I mean, I know there are so many methods.
Sorry to interrupt you, but this would only happen if people who are dyslexic would talk about it. Like if they say that this is a problem, this is a challenge, but this is my, say, superpower, special gift, whatever that is. If we own up to our imperfect stories, we will encourage more imperfect people to own their stories, and then it is like a ripple effect.
Yeah, so that's what I said. Like in India, not many people are aware, are not talking about it. Whereas in US, we do see there are teachers who are trained to teach such kind of kids. There are various methods which are available with this. I don't remember there are a couple of scientists who discovered the methods, and there is a Barton method which is very famous that I know, and people are using it. Teachers are using it, but then having these different tools coming out at this time, people who are talking about it, I think it's encouraging. I'm sure some of the viewers would analyze what's going on with their kids, or some of them reflect back, maybe I was one of them, and I never
I
knew it.
meet others. I meet others. They tell me that I wish I would have known this about me. I took a test after, just to give it a shot, or after hearing a conversation like ours. So they take tests online, or they go and meet experts, and they realize, oh my God, all along I was dyslexic. And no doubt I had all these struggles. So I felt, if you are a dyslexic, it is easier for you to make mistakes in public, owning that you are a dyslexic, because before that you're trying to be like everyone else. So I stopped being like other people and trying to be perfect or correct in many ways, and that was relieving, because I'm like, okay, now I can breathe and I can just do and focus on what I really want to do.
Right. So we'll come back to our graphology part, where you are reading between the lines and you're, analyzing people, how they write, what kind of pressure they're putting, where they're curling their letters, and, commenting on them, or finding out their personalities through that. You are helping them to change at certain level by changing their handwriting. When the person itself is fluid, my handwriting 10 years before was not the same. 10 years after, we don't know how it's going to be, because not many people are writing now. So how that consistent change can be brought in, I mean, because there are always some part of the nature in the human, that cannot be changed. There are only behavior patterns or some type of things which are outer, or but at subconscious level you cannot change everything. So how do you relate this graphology as a tool to
So I
yeah,
feel a lot of shift happens when people receive a powerfully neutral feedback. So when I'm giving feedback, and I'm not saying that you're wrong here for doing this, but I'm going from a perspective where I reason out, these are the possible reasons why you behave like this, which one is true for you. Now I feel a great feedback given by anybody, where the person is not judging you or putting you in boxes, is very, very liberating. So that is the first way to use graphology, because you suddenly meet a stranger, and instead of like doing the formal conversation, I dive deep and talk about your deepest part, and I talk about the toughest problem. So that suddenly becomes like, okay, this person can see through my facade, and suddenly people start opening up. That's a very, very beautiful and powerful gateway to open up the deeper area. So that by itself is powerful. When we talk about graphotherapy, we don't change overall handwriting. Your handwriting keeps changing, I agree, and it must if it is constantly reflecting you. You are not the same person who you were 10 years ago, and you won't be after 10 years. Probably knowing you, probably you won't be the same person next year. You'll keep learning and keep changing. Now, in that case, your handwriting must reflect because it's an active tool. But handwriting also has three parts. One is the rigid one, which is like your bone structure. It
Hmm.
never changes.
Hmm.
It never changes. It stays throughout, even when you die, the structure remains the same. It
Hmm.
may grow and all of that, but the structure won't change. Similarly, handwriting has some traits which are that permanent. Second part is like your skin that ages with time. So some
Hmm.
traits change as you grow. So they change every 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, and they change. And when you look at handwriting, you can find them. But there
Hmm.
are other traits which are very temporary. And then your handwriting size changes. Sometimes you write a little right and sometimes straight. So they are mood driven. So they are like your expressions. They keep changing every now and then. So you don't have to like think about it. You think a thought and your face shows that. So you're not necessarily actively even choosing that. So similarly, handwriting also has it. So what you think is your handwriting changing or not, to me it's a graph. And most of the time the graph is consistent. When we make changes in handwriting, we're not actually, nobody writes nowadays. We're not making any beautification to your writing. We
Hmm.
use strokes, so we would use alphabets or letters
Hmm.
literally as a way to access that part of your emotional area. And this is the most difficult, the most it began because my mother was diagnosed diabetic when I had just started the work 16 years ago. And I was excited and I'm like, oh my God, I know this therapy. And this was type 2 diabetes, which is based on stress. So I'm like, if you have stress and if this is the insecurity, what if I use this graphotherapy, which is for stress? So 2 plus 2 in my basic logic, I said, let's experiment.
Hmm.
And she practiced those strokes for 6 months. Her medication reduced and eventually stopped and has never come back till now. So when
Wow.
that happened, for
Hmm.
me, that was like, I saw something that I couldn't unsee after that. I had to like experiment with it. So I employed a lot of resources. In the last 16 years, we have done thousands of case studies on only graphotherapy, where changing a stroke, an alphabet like a letter, or sometimes combinations of that, or some non-alphabetical, as I said, a flow kind of a stroke. Now, using that actually creates some changes, and those changes stay for a very very long time. So I meet people after 7 years, 10 years, and they are still writing the change that we made that time. So it's not
Wow.
like, oh, they make the change and they forget it. That doesn't happen luckily, because I think it's a lot to do with muscle and brain coordination. So when something functions from that perspective, it's like cycling or swimming. You think you've forgotten it because you haven't cycled for so long. But once you get on track, you try, and after 2-3 minutes, you get a hang of it, and then you cycle or you swim because the muscles are driving that skill. Same with handwriting. So that has become part of every module I run. So graphotherapy is what I did is I use it with high performance coaching. So our
Hmm.
leaders, all executives that we work with go through graphotherapy. We call it grapho coaching. It's like a
Hmm.
new space that I am doing research around, and I wish to teach courses in the future. Not yet, not now. But the whole idea of coaching through graphology and specifically graphotherapy is something
Hmm.
I feel my main research lies on around.
Wow. Certainly, we are looking forward for the courses that are coming from you, because I know you have been putting a lot of efforts in studying this in a scientific manner, so that this profession can also be excelled, or this can be looked at it in a very serious mode. I know there are many people who analyze people through the signatures or handwriting, but many don't know that what has been analyzed can also be converted in a way that somebody can succeed, and you're doing that wonderful job, I believe.
Thank you. And I feel, I think so many times you feel that people don't know about it, and this is not like a recognized profession. But then you suddenly on LinkedIn, people have started writing graphologists as their careers now, 10
Hmm.
years down the line. And when I look at that, I feel it's worth all the struggle, because some people, some of us had to claim the space to say this is possible 16 years ago. And now
Right.
people are looking at it, and people are aspiring graphologists. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like, you have really like a new career altogether that people are considering. That's good.
Right. I know that you were on the panels where the students will get interviewed, or if they need a career guidance. You have done some kind of work in the schools for the kids. So I'd like to know more about it. I mean, how this helps, or finding their own career path, or finding their which fields to move on, or something of that sort, or even picking the employees for their organizations. How does it help?
So I began the work, and we thought the whole space of selection based on graphology could be a good business to be in. And we realized in Bombay, or especially in India for that matter, we have lots of people for some jobs. So for people to invest only selection in graphology as a kind of new tool, they were not very keen on doing. So quickly we kind of wound up that field. We worked at it for a few months, and we said, okay, let's launch this for selection. And that didn't work for us professionally. So I now do assessment centers for executives or top level executives where they're doing exit interviews, or in their panel I'm part of, because their the feedback is specific, and that is also at a level where they're about to make a decision. So that one-on-one feedback or conversation becomes meaningful, because you're hiring three people like that in 1 year. So then people consider that feedback in a very, very different light. With kids, I have done some work in schools, but that was more on social level, where we worked with teachers to understand the kids slightly better. But I haven't been on guidance or also child psychology. So it's a large space. I'm not trained in that field, so I always keep myself away from it. Also, I feel parents generally expect kids to follow a path that they agree with, and I haven't done it. So I feel I'm morally absolutely the wrong person to teach somebody what career they should be picking from three options, because I haven't done that. So I keep myself away from that. I feel I intend to do that in the future, to teach teachers how they can use graphology to understand the emotional challenges the child is going through. So anytime I have ever I've taken a case where the child was suffering and we could see something from writing, I do not give feedback to the kid. I speak to the parents, and I talk to them about the kind of behavioral challenge the child is having, or emotional challenge, and I request them to make the change, but not to the child, because I feel that requires tremendous amount of a different kind of skill set, and I'm not getting into it, so I don't venture in that way.
Okay. That just reminded me of Kahani 2 movie, where the girl's pictures have been analyzed and then figured it out what exactly she's going through. That's an example, to put
And that
forward.
part of the picture analysis or doodling analysis is part of graphology. Even
Yeah.
painting analysis. So you look at it and you can see what the creator of that art or the doodler was thinking while doing that. So that's part of graphology.
So since that doodling technique that you talk about, so you also analyze handwriting, which is a language. You're analyzing people who are writing language. So whichever scripts that you don't know, you can still analyze them in a efficient way.
Yeah, so handwriting has two parts. One is letter driven, like English, specifically in Latin script. So any language that is Latin based, we can analyze that, because the research is done on those letters. So that is given. But languages which are, say, Devanagari, in India we have Devanagari, Sanskrit based languages. Now, those languages can be analyzed for factors like pressure or spacing between the letters or the words, or the way they move when they write on a blank sheet of paper. Now, you can always analyze writing, because there are so many patterns which are beyond language. Even Urdu language, which is opposite in many, many ways, still follows the pressure and spacing and all those factors for you to understand. So it doesn't matter which language it is. Having said that, almost 95% of our work professionally is in English language. So in India, because it's a first or second language depending on which state you belong to, English. So everybody knows how to write English. So we use English as a main function.
Yeah. So moving ahead of the language, you also analyze logo and you help changing their logos so that the organizations or the personal brands, if they're carrying any, they can always excel or they can succeed. how that technique works. By changing logo, they can mm, portray better. I mean, I know that the logo does depict a lot. It gives 1,000 words in one symbol, but changing at certain levels, how can it help achieving them better?
So I feel actually, let me tell you how it began. I was on a radio show, and Mangal Pandey was releasing next week when we were recording one particular show.
Hmm.
And I saw the logo, and I said, this movie gonna be kind of half truth because the logo said so.
Hmm.
And my co-RJ, she looked at me and like, why do you say that? I'm like, because the logo has that thing. It has certain strokes, which
Hmm.
means that the truth is hidden. Now we laughed about it, we joked about it, and then we left it at that. Next week, before the launch, there were some protesters who fought and who launched complaints saying that this is not the truth. You cannot say this about Mangal Pandey. This is not true. And she called me. She's like, have you seen that news? And I'm like, no. So when we really looked at it, we are like, oh. She said, you said that in the logo. Why don't we add this as a feature in our radio show of
Hmm.
movie logo analysis? So we said that would be fun, Bollywood radio channel. So we would enjoy that. So we started doing it. And every time we did that, every week, some or other entrepreneur would send us their logo. Some small or medium business owner will send us his logo. And we started receiving logos on the radio station with people's questions. So then I
Hmm.
realized there is something underneath that people want to know. So I sat down and I feel how signature of a person is your public image. It's not your handwriting. Handwriting means that talks about who you are. Whereas
Hmm.
signature, which you do as a legal identity, talks
Hmm.
about when I'm not there, consider this as me. And it's
Yep.
literally like a projection of who you are or who you want people to look at you as. The way signature is your personal logo out there, logo is a signature to the company. So when I started seeing, so what we did is we collected handwriting sample of the entire organization
Hmm.
and drew symbolically in graphological aspect what were the common things that the team faced and what were the things seen in the logo. And I was surprised, I was blown away that there were similarities and parallels we could draw between the
Hmm.
logo and the collected handwriting sample study, the reports. And then I knew that if I change this, that would get affected. Now, when we started doing that as actual case studies, people who were really troubled in that organization left. New people joined in. The organizational way of functioning changed. Now, all of this is because we are psychologically projecting a concept. A mission statement is where you have agreed to some ways of functioning and you say, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to work at. This is where my organization wants to go. Similarly, logo is exactly that. Logo is a symbolic form of that vision or mission statement. So designing it with designers, like I don't design myself, we have designers on the team. It's a treat because like you get to work with people who by now also understand. Initially they used to wonder like why don't you approve this and why don't you like this is so creative. So we used to have a lot of like those challenges, but by now people understand why we choose whatever we do.
Wow. That's a very different way to look at it. We never knew about it. I mean, at least I never knew about it. Maybe some of us are aware about it. And with this, whatever that you said, now I think people will look more into what their work they are doing, how they're projecting their logos, and may try to weigh it, because if it's gonna give them a success, why not?
Of course, why not? Of course. And it is also like a vehicle. Wherever you want to go, if you have a faster vehicle, you reach there faster. So I look at it from that perspective. So if I am already putting in efforts and if I add on something that can just make it boost my efficiency, I would use that. So I look at logos from that perspective.
So now you are in this profession for more than 16 years. You are doing a lot of study. You are even, studying something that will come hand in hand, going for the psychometrist specialist, or, whichever fields that can excel the graphology technique to help people better is what you're doing, is what we see. But being in this graphology field, what kind of challenges do you face, and how they should be addressed so that this profession can sustain in a much better way, can enrich, and parents can look at it for their kids as a one of the profession.
One of my biggest challenges is what is graphology? What? Are you a graphic designer? That's my biggest challenge. Like every time. So I remember like 6, 7 years into my career, I was like fed up. I'm like, not one more time. I'm not answering this question now. And also like, how you're new to it. So you're excited, you want to do it. Then you
Yeah.
get a hang of it and you're like, no, don't ask me the same question again. By now, till date, I hear that question at least once because people don't know the field. That's the biggest challenge. But I feel if somebody is inclined in any psychology related professions, so if you want to become a full-time graphologist, the professional avenues are you can become a child specialist. So you support your study of graphology with your other studies like counseling, like psychiatrists have learned that people who are in sales and marketing and they understand that they need to understand their teams better, they use graphology. So it can always be your add-on to you. So when we teach graphology, I have started teaching it recently because I realized that even as a better spouse, to become a better friend, we don't know how to approach that conversation. We know that we want to be there for the other person. So we have in Bollywood we have this superstar, or I would say a very brilliant actor, Sushant Singh Rajput, who was diagnosed depressed and he committed suicide. So in that scenario, like the entire nation had that thought about depression going really, really active. So he started this process of teaching graphology as a short course, also because I feel people have to turn into wellness warriors. All of us have to know how we approach our siblings and our family members, and without knowing what is happening inside their minds, it becomes very, very difficult. So we are teaching graphology so that people are equipped to have those uncomfortable conversations. So if you see a problem area, you don't say you have a problem area, you are less judgmental, you know how to give that feedback. Professionally speaking, any psychology related field or any field where you have to understand the other person, you can implement graphology as an add-on to. If you want to use it, you can do the job selection process, you can work with kids and do the career guidance, and those are the possibilities as of now as I think about it. The market has to be open, but that can only happen when we have more graphologists into the fold, when people start seeing how close this subject is to psychology. The challenge here, and I'm saying I'm being very, very honest about it because I don't want anybody to have any wrong ideas. The challenge is people are not writing often. So people, like the whole quick understanding of it. And also as we will move to technology, you won't write much. But that doesn't mean you cannot analyze. As I said already, you can always find a way to do that. You can use doodles, you can use paintings, you can use drawings to interpret the mind. But the powerful part is the hand, and the strokes created by the hand can give away information at the deepest level. I feel that is so powerful because it is honest. Other psychometric tools, and I'm certified into other three of them, but when I use them, I feel when you're answering the question, you may manipulate the question, knowingly or unknowingly. But in handwriting, I can't manipulate my own handwriting. When I start writing, so many times I do that. I just write a paragraph to see when you're confused, you're lost, you're feeling angry, you don't understand what is happening. I just write a paragraph, and after 1 hour or two, I look at my sample, and my emotions are calm. And I look at it and I analyze myself, and I realize, okay, this is what is happening. So you can't fool it. Even if you know the subject, you can't fool it. So I find that is very, very powerful as a mirror mechanism to know anything that is happening in your mind.
Interesting. Um, so when you say that this graphology can help people for the wellness as well, I know that you have also been working with some sort of patients who have had a huge setback from the health point of view or from mental trauma point of view to recover them better after they have gone through, because it's not easy to forget everything, that traumatizing period of the treatments in the hospital or whatever. So you're helping them to achieve a particular goal. Even for that matter, when you're working with the professionals, when you're working with, I know you're working with Bollywood industry as well, to help them better achieve their success, to make them focused and all that part. So these are all result oriented, if I look at it. and at the same level you're also working to unfold the strengths which they also don't know, or they're in the relation or in their circle who knows those kind of people, they also don't know what kind of strengths they may have. So you're unfolding so many truths also. So how does it go together hand in hand, this goal oriented teaching and then this unfolding the hidden talents?
See, I feel, when with my personal experience even more, that if you are actually dealing with your truest talent, sometimes it is hidden, sometimes you find it at age of 40 or wherever in the future, or sometimes you already know that in the initial part of your work. But if Carl Jung, who is one of my favorite psychiatrists of all
Hmm.
time, spoke about this. He said the only goal that you have in your life is to realize yourself. Now, the
Hmm.
self that he was referring to is not necessarily the self that you know.
Hmm.
Everything that known, unknown to you, that is
Hmm.
out there. Your job is to make sure that you experience that side of you. Now, if you decide that as your goal and that makes you happy and all of that, but goal orientation for me is aligning with who you are. So I remember one of my clients who was in publication business as a family business was struggling because physical books started reducing and textbook became digital. So for them, that was the main business. And he said, I don't know anything else that I can do. And as we studied his personality, we realized that his talent or his skill was with flowers. He was beautiful with flowers, and he, had a farmhouse, and he took a lot of interest. So I walked with him for the transition in that period, and he literally started another business, which is a flower business, which he would have never thought about. But he wakes up every morning, and now he looks forward to it way more than the publication business, because that was his family business. Now here he is like doing something he loves. So I
Hmm.
feel goal orientedness is about really operating from all your strengths. Having said
Hmm.
that, there are areas when you're even on your most beloved idea of work, there are areas that you don't want to deal with. There are areas that are pressurizing. Sometimes professionally, you have to show up no matter what, and that could be stressful. Now, there we use different tools, different methods, which are
Hmm.
based on graphology or otherwise. Get trained into using hacks and tools and methods uh,
Hmm.
to to move yourself, to propel forward in the future, and to
Hmm.
learn a skill. So I have a small belief. I believe if something hurts, if something
Hmm.
is painful, then that is the area is not to be ignored or avoided. It's the area to open the lid and look into. That is your next growth. Now, if you grow out of that painful area, then you're no more enslaved by it. But if you don't know, if you keep avoiding it, you'll always be worried that, oh my God, what if I get into a situation where that shows up? The hidden thing, the hidden monster shows up. There'll always be in struggle inside. But if you know that, okay, this is what I can't do, and my job is to make sure that I have to hack it, I have to find a way around it. And I feel fascinated by it because minds can be trained, like body, your mind can be trained. It's just that you have to use right tool to train it. If you keep
Hmm.
using like fear as a tool, there's a saying where they say if the only tool that you have is a hammer, then you will
Hmm.
think every problem is a nail. You will
Hmm.
not, but your job is to find different tools and have an entire toolbox. So new
Hmm.
problem, new tool. Like how chefs would know which knife to use, what when they cut different things. They
Right.
won't use one knife to other, right? To cut fish, they have separate thing. To cut vegetables, they have something else. Now, if you really want to know that, that will make your performance even more goal oriented and more intricate. So I feel for me they're very, very closely associated. If you're not well, if you're not in a way in connection with your mind and your body, then whatever you do will pull you down in some or other format. So it's very, very tough any which ways.
Wow. So it was, amazing journey and amazing facts that, you just unfolded for all of us. I will go on and on this topic because, it's a curiosity now that, it just,
Yeah, you're getting all like charged up. You're like, one more question. Oh, I want to say that
yeah.
also.
And especially when there is a scientific background or the logical background that comes into the picture, people get more serious to understand what is it. But we have a limited time show, and before you go, we have something very good rounds for you, you know. So yeah, we'll get started with the rapid fire round.
Okay. Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes, I am all geared up. I'm doing it for the first time. Go ahead.
So now we know that you have done a good logography work and you have a team and you started analyzing all of it. Which is your favorite logo?
I don't have a favorite logo, but I really like HDFC Bank logo. I think it's structured and it's open, and I look at it. Also, Kotak Bank, because they use K, which is a Marathi Devanagari letter in the middle of the logo as infinity. I thought both of them were very creatively done.
Wow. So I know you embrace a lot of art fields. You have worked with many artists and you love being in these artistic fields all the time. But which is your favorite art form?
So I love abstract. Like every time I travel, I make sure that I visit contemporary art museums. Contemporary art is something, it's open to interpretation and to say something in a minimalistic way, or like in a really, really abstract way. I feel that gives so much of space for my brain to thrive. Like, I read so much between the lines, so I love it. Last month, I started. My father was an art director, so we grew up watching a lot of art and art galleries and shows and all of that. But last month, for the first time in my life, I started doodling and drawing with one of the artists called, his name is Arzan Khambata. He's a very well-renowned artist in India. And it has been beautiful. I can't, every day I have dedicated 20 to 40 minutes to do my doodling and sketch art work, and I'm looking forward to it.
Wow. What's the next word comes to your mind when I say improvement?
Life.
Hmm. Okay.
And
Wow.
I must say this, okay? Like I have like every 2 3 years I'm a different person. So people, we have this joke, okay, which upgrade is going on in Aditi's life? So that's literally like improvement and upgrading is what I keep doing. So yeah, I totally think that is the
One common fear that stops someone dreaming big that you must have analyzed over the period of time.
I think is trying to get things right.
Hmm.
Because when you want to get something right, you want to make sure that you will not fall, you will not fail. And all of us know what we have learned falling and failing, that we wouldn't have done the growing and moving forward part without it. But people constantly avoid it. So I would say be really willing to play the game. So you may fall, you may get up, and both is okay.
Give another word for dyslexia. Or
Magic.
maybe
Magic.
interesting. I mean, it is magic. I mean, they are gifted with some magical powers.
You
I
have
mean, no.
no clue. It's a party going on here. People are reading online when you have world opening up. It's just that while studying or in school, I was made so wrong for it. I'm so happy that I got this profession, Pranali. Otherwise, I would have become like this horrible executive or like bank man, whatever manager. Because like I think in this manner. So, and also personally, I feel when you know that you can be thrown into any situation and the door will open for you or something else will open for you. Over a period of time, I feel I'm not scared anymore to be thrown anywhere, which I feel is a great, great gift, because this is your ability to open the next door, without which I don't think I would have done much better in any other.
So before you go, we like to get a guidance from you. That's the purpose of all of our shows, where we seek a good guidance from the angle that the guest is working in their fields. So what you would like to advise our viewers for converting their passion to the careers at the point when someone realizes their strengths? It could be after 40 years of their life. It could be after 10 years of their life. Some people are very lucky to find it at the right point, but some people are not. So for them, what kind of guidance that you would give to pursue them what they're good at?
First thing I would say is always worth a shot. It's always worth a shot because you would not look back on your life and say that I wish I would have done it. I had
Mm.
that feeling and I wish I would have done it. So, without regrets, if you know that giving it a shot, and I'm not saying you will successfully make it or break it, because I know many people who have
Mm.
chosen their passion as a career and professionally they probably didn't do well. So, I won't say that you jump in and everything will work out. No, I will say that this is worth a shot. The fact that you would look forward to every day and this is invaluable. That feeling is invaluable. Second point is if you are passionate doesn't make you a professional. So being a professional in that field requires doing things that you may or may not like initially, but they're
Mm.
essential part of it. For example, if in my profession, having all this intuition and love and all of that was great. But if I couldn't have combined it with other psychological fields or seeing where people can get benefited by it or uncomfortable learning curves like learning how to record and all of that, then you cannot do justice to it because as a professional you require it all. You require all other aspects. So only passion won't get you far. It will become the fuel of your car, but it can't become your entire car. So make sure there are people who like drag their feet, they have the car but no fuel, and then
Mm.
that's not fun for them, and then they get exhausted and they get burnt out.
Right.
Lucky you have passion, you have that fuel, but you still need the car. So make sure that that is required. And third, very, very important thing is when you fall, when you fail, don't question your passion the first thing. Question this as a overall case study or a situation. Like if you fight with your spouse, you don't sit there and say, "Oh, do I want to be in this relationship or not?" You say, "Okay, what did we do wrong? What went wrong? What we could have done differently?" So similarly, it's not that you choose passion and everything becomes like golden touch. Doesn't happen. For some people it does, but for most, for practical reasons. And it is also not that passion will always be this emotional journey. After a point,
Mm.
it becomes mundane, it becomes boring. You're like, God, I have to do this again. As I was telling, one more person asked me how graphology works, and I'm going to run from here. But that is a point, is very, very important point where you ask yourself, why did I begin this? And I
Mm.
feel that is very important. That is a game changer. So it took some time for me to realize that I was getting irritated, and I'm like, oh my god, when will I grow? When will I go to the next stage? And I took a sabbatical break from my work for 2.5 years,
Mm.
and that was a point I spent time realizing why did I begin this in the first place. I really
Mm.
wanted to help a dyslexic girl in me, or like an imperfect girl or a child in other person, to own their space, and that child, the inner child or the child within every adult,
Mm.
I feel is my commitment. So it doesn't matter how many times you ask me how graphology works now, because when I came back to my profession again, I'm like, I can't live happy as this because the reason, the why behind it was way more important than me, my passion, my work. All of this is a supportive tool. But your reason to work, your reason to show up, I feel make sure that you have that sorted. Money can't be that reason, unfortunately. Money is just one more tool to take you forward. So money
Mm.
can't be that reason. So if you're passionate, ask yourself, passion, I can do it as a hobby, great. To make it a profession, what is my actual reason? Nothing.
I think you said it all. You gave a lot of tips, that one should always remember. It's not just, your passion will make you proceed further, but then along with that, whatever that it needs, which can become mundane, you also have to, own them, own those parts. Otherwise, you will never succeed. I mean, that's true in any field. If you're working, I mean, you have to own certain type of areas which are not so dear to you, but they are part of your life, they're part of your that work. It's like working in the kitchen. Oh, I like cooking, but who will do cleaning?
True, true.
That's
And
the
so
other
many
side.
people struggle with cleaning and then they don't do cooking to begin with. That's so beautifully put. And then they rob themselves of the possibility of exploring cooking because of
Hmm.
cleaning, right? So they don't they don't play with their passion only because a part of that activity is painful.
Yeah. So nicely said, and it is such a good advice. I have to reflect back on what you said, because sometimes it does put down everyday job, everyday work, although somebody likes what they're doing. And I think one should tap onto it and move on.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And
that advice.
I also feel the last thing I want to say is if you love what you do, it's your responsibility to do a great job. Because people who don't love what they do, they're
Hmm.
showing up, they're running businesses, they are like, really, really doing great work as a financial unit. If crazy, passionate, well being oriented people, if you really want to show up, you want to do even a better job because in the new normal, you have to own up so much. If you do, if you become like those corporate giants of like crazy
Hmm.
passionate people, then only you can create the tilt, and it's one step at a time.
Thank you for giving that step to us. It was wonderful to have you. We'll keep on to this Women's Special Express show, and we'll come up with more and more guests on our show who will give us that kind of guidance from different fields to understand what those fields are. Well, if you like this show and if you want to know more about it and want to get more updates promptly, please subscribe to this channel, Women's Special Express show. Thank you.
Thank you.
I let go of my claim on you. It's a free world. You look down on where you came from sometimes, but you have this place to call